Exit 12 is not affiliated with any 12-step group or outside organizations. The purpose of this podcast is for informational and educational purposes only. No person or organization is receiving any monetary gain from the recording, production, or distribution of this podcast. All hosts and guests are participating of their own free will and are only sharing their own personal experiences. Subjects discussed in this podcast may be triggering for some individuals. Listeners' discretion advised. Welcome to the first episode of Exit 12. I am Bryan Fields, your host, and I am joined by my co-host, Isaac and Michelle.
Well, that would be co-hosts, right?
I said hosts. Did I say host?
Yeah.
We
are
it,
two
Isaac.
distinct people.
Do you want to restart, Isaac?
No, I think we should just roll with it.
That's how this is going to go, so fasten your seatbelts.
My job here is to be a little bit of a disturber.
Yep.
So I'm just warming
you're
up.
good at
I'm
that.
just warming up now.
Yeah.
Just warming up now. I'm excited for this podcast. We've been talking about this for so long.
So let's talk about how we even came to this conclusion
Sure.
and what brought this on.
Sure. You and Michelle Parker were talking about group. And
group?
And I had
Thou shalt not be named.
Well, that is kind of the whole thing, right?
Yeah.
And I had a ton of questions, and it was a fun conversation. And then we were like, what if we just recorded this? And now we're just going to record this.
Absolutely.
I think something that Linda, one of our empowerment coaches, said is that it doesn't matter if you are a gambling addict or a alcoholic or addicted to any sort of activity or substance that you shouldn't be doing. Working the 12 steps is just a way of living life, and it can benefit everyone.
Yeah.
So I'm ready to learn some more about the 12 steps and how it can benefit my life, and hopefully all of our listeners will too. We have our disclaimer out front, and this is not step one. This is an intro to the podcast because we felt like we needed to reiterate that this is the guests that we will have on, all of us. We are all here of our own free will. No one is receiving any sort of monetary compensation from this. If it blows up, I will turn off ads. Yeah. We are trying to do this by the book, and we are talking about it as a way to self-check yourself, evaluate yourself, apply it to your daily life.
Not only that, though, like I think when we first had talked about it, the intrigue that you had hearing Michelle and I talk about it, and you'll hear it in these groups, like when you first go to a meeting, it's like hearing a different language, right? Like it's it's like Charlie Brown. Yeah, for sure, right? And so I think it's really important too for family members that have people in recovery or want to get them into recovery, like what that looks like, and to give them that insight, I think is super impactful, right? And I think having somebody here that hasn't gone through the 12 steps to be a co-host will be super awesome.
Yeah, I think in that conversation, I said my only experience with any sort of group is watching Finding Nemo and have the shark support group. I am an eye shark, not a mindless killing machine.
Yeah.
They sure friends,
not
food.
Not food. Yeah. I mean, and Bryan, I wanted you to touch on this. Is I know that a lot of people have a lot of feelings about the word anonymous, right? And that's why we are not there are no names and no stories being shared from anyone that is outside of this room, right? It's very important, but I don't think anonymous means secret society, right?
No.
I think that for me, for a lot of people that I know, and we kind of went through this with a family member this year, like group or joining a group or taking that first step is really, really scary.
Yeah.
And so I think that a big goal of this for me is, we want to respect anonymity, but we also want to make it less scary, and we want to give people an intro into what this system of thinking can do for you.
I think, I've talked about it and touched on it with you guys, like outside of here a few different times. And I think people have this misconception of anonymity as well as anonymous, right? And so anonymity, like that means I can't break your anonymity, right? Like I can't share your story, right? But that doesn't confine me to share my own story. And I think the fear is that, we'll come out here and try to be poster children for, 12-step programs, and that's not at all what we're trying to do.
Yeah, definitely not. I don't know.
And so at the end of the day, like, there's not really a whole lot anonymous anymore about 12-step programs. There's plenty of other podcasts out there. I like to make the joke that if you see 12 people standing outside of a church smoking cigarettes, you know exactly what's happening at that church. You know what I mean? And so,
but in the early days, it's important to acknowledge that it did have to be anonymous.
It did have to be anonymous, right? It was in the protection of the people attending those meetings because of the things that they were doing to alcoholics, right? Like, and it's a lot different than it is today, like they're performing lobotomies and things like that to alcoholics. And so that's not the case anymore. And that's not what we're doing anymore. And so I hope that the community can kind of see this for what it is and support us and understand that all we're trying to do is just give some information for anybody that has any questions or thoughts about like what this looks like and share our own personal experience. And that's all that it's going to be.
Yeah, and you can't recover in silos, right? I mean, we recover. A connection is the opposite of addiction,
right?
And I think when we were doing the Recovery Month discussions, an underlying theme of all 8 of our panelists that we heard from was the isolation and how alone they felt when they were in their addiction, right? And I think it's a good thing to talk about something that has had a profound impact in both of your lives and the lives of our guests and could do a lot for a potential listener of this podcast that maybe is where I'm at right now, which is I have what'd you call me yesterday? A normie?
A normie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Zero experience with any of this, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's where we're kind of marketing this because we want to promote a life-changing thing, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and I think when I first heard of like AA, I thought it was for people who were homeless, people who really, really struggled with alcohol. But deep down, it was like, it's people who, cannot just have one drink, or it has to be like a weekly thing.
Right. I don't even think it's that, right? Because what is the requirement? It's a desire to stop drinking. It's not a hey, I'm a severe alcoholic or hey, I'm homeless. It's hey, I think sometimes I drink a little bit and my life is unmanageable because I had plenty of times where I had one drink. You know what I mean? I had plenty of times where I had one drink and I went to a bar and watched a football game. You know what I mean? But the facts were that when I continuously drank alcohol, I turned into a different person, and I had that desire, right? I didn't really have like this like super motivation or was like ready to just run to the front of the podium and be like, yeah, here I am, or anything like that. But I had that desire. And that's one thing that I hope a lot of people get from this is like, you don't have to be fully put together or even have a whole idea in mind to explore this avenue. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it'd be super, super good. So Michelle.
Yes.
Would you like to introduce yourself and just kind of give us a little brief synopsis of your experience and
sure.
Yeah.
Don't you have to start with hi, I'm Michelle?
Hi, I'm Michelle. I'm an
Hi,
alcoholic.
Michelle.
Hi, Michelle.
That's the only other thing I know about.
Well, I've in November I'll be 4 years sober from drugs and alcohol. I didn't know anything about recovery when before I got sober. Like everyone I knew, everyone I was surrounded with, it was either we're drinking tonight or, we're drinking the next day or whatever. Mm-hmm. And like, I didn't have friends or family. It was rare that they didn't drink. And so nobody really talked about it either. Right. And like, I grew up with alcoholic parents, and So like it was just normal. So I thought it was like a normal thing that people just drink and party and do drugs and whatever, because it was surrounded by me. And so I grew up thinking that that was cool and that was the thing. And then I got my first DUI, and I lost my license, and I had to go to treatment. So I went to treatment for like 3 months, and I think the treatment thing, like you graduate, right? And so in my mind, I thought I was like fixed. So I'm like, oh, cool.
I'm out.
Yeah.
Graduated, yeah.
And, I didn't think I was an alcoholic because I wasn't like my mom, right? And so, like, I wasn't binge drinking like she was. And so I was like, I'm not an alcoholic, or a joke that I'm an alcoholic, but I didn't see it. And so when I went to treatment, I was just like, yeah, I'm doing all these good things and I'm doing great. And like, I didn't consider myself an alcoholic. And so, but I fell back into using again, like drinking, and my life slowly started becoming unmanageable. Like I thought, because I had my own place, I had a car, I had a nice job, and I had all these things that presented like I was great, but mentally and emotionally and physically I was not doing so great, and didn't really realize that until I had my tragic accident, right? It was about 6 months later, I got my driver's license back. 3 months after I got my driver's license, I had another DUI, but it was tragic. And I, did jail, and I started doing a lot of self-reflection, and that's where I really found my higher power, and I started connecting with that. And I didn't really realize that my life was unmanageable until I went there, when I lost everything. I lost everything, and I was like, oh, just because I had all those things didn't mean I had my life together. And so when I got out, I immediately wanted to go to AA, and Linda, she mentioned it because a couple other clients had gone, and she's taken them before. And so I went, completely fell in love with it. Like I was just like, oh my gosh, there's so many people that are like me. Like, you're sick too.
Getting better.
Yeah. And like it was definitely confusing at first, like the Charlie Brown want get a sponsor, want. Stay sober, don't drink, and do fellowship and whatever. And like the steps, like kind of understood it a little bit, but I didn't really understand it. And so until I started going more and like actually attending meetings, and then like getting called up, and then people reading different things in the book, and then reading the book like talks about like how alcoholics are. And I was just like, oh my gosh, I am an alcoholic. And so like it's definitely very confusing at first, and like I didn't really understand the sponsor thing too, because when I first got out, I asked my old coworker to be my sponsor, but I didn't know she had to have her sponsor too. I had like have her own sponsor, and she had to work a program and whatever. So and you're technically not supposed to ask your friends, right?
Yeah, for sure.
So it was definitely interesting. So that first part was interesting. Then I had another sponsor. She was more close to like a friend than she was a sponsor. And then after a year of her having her as a sponsor, I realized I needed someone who could really call me out on my BS, hold me accountable, and be like, actually, that's called self-centeredness. That's your ego getting in the way. And so it was very interesting the first time I like really started learning about recovery, but now I get to talk openly about it, and I think it's really cool, and I think the 12 steps is an amazing outlet for a lot of people too.
Yeah.
And you know, I have family members who are alcoholics but aren't interested in the 12-step program because they think we're a bunch of whiny people, and
So they're not like totally wrong.
but I think it's great for you know, whoever's interested in it.
For sure.
Yeah, I don't think either of you guys in any conversations I've had with you have said like it's the 12 steps or you're wrong, right? Like, everyone's recovery journey is different. I want to go back to something you said really quick, which there is no, it's not 14 drinks in a week. It's not more than X amount of drinks in a day. It's where you were at emotionally and mentally, and the fact that you felt like you were not in control of your life, and that's the key.
Yeah,
right?
For sure.
Yeah, because like you could have a job,
a
well-paying job, your own place, a car, and all these things in your life, materialistic things in your life. But like if you're not managing it well, probably
for sure.
Probably an alcoholic.
And I just want to say thank you, Michelle, for, you know, having the courage to recover out loud, and you know, because there's people dying out there, and you know, if we keep this thing all to ourselves, then how are they going to get better? And it doesn't mean that, like, you know, there are people out there that believe it's like 12 steps or nothing, you know, whatever group it is, but you know, the fact is there's like 23 national. And that was like 2 years ago. So that number could have increased, but pathways to recovery, you know what I mean? And so having the ability to be able to come on something like this and share openly, you know, I think is going to have a huge impact on our community. So,
yeah. And not everyone has to share openly too.
Right.
I mean, you should be able to recover as
you please. Yeah.
Yeah. 100%.
Yeah, for sure. It's not a pressure thing, but if you feel like you have the voice, like there's people that are willing to listen to you too at the same time. Like, I know that for me, like when I first got sober, I was so ashamed of my past that I didn't want anybody to know. Like I'm a recovering heroin addict. You know what I mean? Like I don't want people to know that. Like, and for me, I remember sitting on Facebook and I seen this video from my hometown, and it was one of my really good friends who unfortunately passed away a couple of years ago. But you know, he was on this video in jail, talking about his use and talking about how the community had changed. And, you know, and then there was also like, there was other people in that video that I knew, and my friend's dad was in that video, and like all kinds of stuff. And I was like, dang, man. And that for me was like, okay, you know, if they can do this, and like that had such a strong impact on me in this moment, why shouldn't I do that? And from that moment on for me, like I've always wanted to kind of step out and just be like, hey, I'm here. You know, I don't claim to know everything. I don't claim to have all the answers, right? But this is what I did. This is what happened to me. This is what I do today. If you want like some help getting to some resources, like let me know and we can do that. So Isaac, what is your experience with the recovery community?
Really happy to be a part of the recovery community in that I get the privilege of providing a platform and helping share and just getting to hear from and work alongside so many of our recovery community members, right?
Yep.
I don't consider myself someone with lived experience. I don't consider myself someone in recovery, but I certainly have learned a lot about myself and learned so much from the strength and the honesty of all of the recovery community members that I've interacted with around here. I think that's what's really cool about the Matsu recovery community is you don't have to be someone that is going to group to walk in the recovery walk.
Yes.
You don't have to be someone that lives with an addiction to participate in the recovery month discussions that we did, or work here at my house or at TNR or anywhere, right?
Yeah.
Well, actually, no, you do have to have lived experience to work at TNR.
No.
But, well,
they have some positions.
yes.
But their goal is to be, I think they're at like 90%.
Right. Their goal is to hire folks with lived experience. But you know, I do so much work with folks that are in recovery. And it's really cool. Like I've never felt ostracized or less than or not welcome at any recovery event that we're doing or in any discussion, right? We're really fortunate to have the recovery community that we have out here. And I don't know, like I just feel so grateful and inspired by like everyone out here that's doing work in this field, because it is not always a super fun time.
No.
Yeah, no, it's not. No. It's not pretty being in the trenches with folks that are struggling every day. Yeah. When it's your 9 to 5, sometimes 5 in the morning to 9 at night job.
Right.
But it is important.
Yeah.
Right. It's a life or death matter.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't know, like it's one of the most eye-opening experiences that I've ever had the past 2.5 years.
And thank you so much for saying that. I think that's a huge common misconception, like that I have to be somebody in recovery to go to these events. And there are like closed meetings that are for, specifically for those people. But like Michelle, you pointed out, like the first meeting you went to, somebody that was not in the 12-step program brought you to that meeting, right? There is a lot of value in having people outside of the recovery community share their voice, their experience, and support, right? And I think I say it all the time, like that's the only way for me that we can truly fully like recover, right? Because I can't recover if I just have this small group of people that I'm accepted by, right? Like I need to be, I don't need to be, but like it definitely helps to be accepted by my community, right? And to be able to walk into my community with my head held high. And if I have people that are outside of that circle that are willing to step in and say, hey, yeah, man, I support you. I don't really know what I can do, but whatever you need me to do, like I'm willing to do as long as it's within reason, you know what I mean? And Isaac, you're such a perfect example and role model of that. I mean, the recovery walk is a great example. Like you were instrumental in making that thing happen, right? And you don't have that lived experience, you know what I mean? And so like you do not have to have lived experience in order to be a part of this community. And I think we need more people without lived experience to be willing to step into this community with us and say, hey, I'm here. I support you.
Yeah. And just because, I mean, none of us are perfect beings, right?
Right.
Like just because, so I'm blessed that my character defects aren't as public maybe as other folks, but am I selfish? Yeah, I can be selfish. Am I impulsive? Yeah, I'm super impulsive, neurotic.
Yeah.
But it doesn't. You can still learn so much, right? Like just because I didn't have to go through a more public struggle, doesn't mean that I'm all of a sudden on a pedestal. Mm-hmm. Like, and just because I didn't have to go through that fight doesn't mean that I'm down here, right? Like it's, and like I said, I've never felt that way with our recovery community. Like I feel like everyone is so welcomed, and if you want a seat at the table, like it's yours. Like let's all work together. And so that's what I'm excited for with this podcast. Is I think we always can be learning more about ourselves, working on ourselves. It's not just no matter how far along the road you're the same distance from the ditch, right? Is something that I heard a lot early on. But I don't think it's just addiction or recovery. Like the day that you think that you know it all and that you have nothing left to work on is usually the day that you get humbled in a big way, right? Yeah. And so I'm always trying to learn more about myself, learn more about recovery and just about life.
Yeah.
And I think that someone that's a big advocate in our building for the 12 steps that kind of has a similar experience to me is Linda. Like never battled with a public addiction, never was a regular attendee of a 12-step group. But do you remember the book that she recommended?
Breathing Underwater.
Breathing Underwater.
By
like,
Richard Rohr.
Just got into it because she wanted to learn more about it, help other people around her, and also, implement some of those life lessons for herself. And I'd really like to read that book, but I'm deliberately not reading it until after this recording is done because my whole goal sitting here in all these recordings is just to ask the questions that come to mind from a point of ignorance so that it can be answered by you guys, by our guests, and hopefully the questions that I have naturally as they come up are questions that maybe a lot of people will have.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Linda has told me before that she really loves like the 12-step program, especially because we have such a strong spiritual belief, and it doesn't matter like what belief you believe in. Like I've met people that their higher power was a mountain,
right?
Or like they had an imaginary dude that had he was like a hippie that would sit in the passenger of the car,
Yeah.
So we really do have a strong spiritual side to it, and I think that's why she really is attracted to it.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it could be beneficial for anybody. Really quick, I'm just going to go over my experience with the 12 steps. So my name is Bryan Fields. I'm a person.
Hi, Bryan.
Hi, Bryan.
Hold on. I'm a person in long-term recovery, and what that means for me is I haven't had to have a drink or a drug since July 20th of 2018. Thank you. Yeah. So for me, I first got introduced to the 12-step community when my mom got sick. And so my mom had gotten sick in, I don't remember what year, but I was like 18, and I was like trying to look for support, and I was drinking every day. And so I went to a couple of these 12-step meetings, and I didn't really get anything from them. I kind of went there and used it as a wine fest, and then I just went about my day. I think I got drunk that day, and so, I was in active addiction for 13 plus years, I think, and my addiction progressed into other substances. And so when I first went to treatment, the treatment center that I went to was centered around the 12 steps. And I was so mad. I was so upset. I was like, I'm not joining your cult. I'm not drinking your Kool-Aid. You got me messed up, dude. And it wasn't until there was a lot of things that happened, but for me to be welcoming to the 12 steps was in the program that I was in. They have you, what they do is it's your step one, right? But it's different. So you write out these different ways that your life is unmanageable, the things that you've done, right? And different aspects of your financial, your health, your family, your da, right? And then you get to sit in a group with everybody that's in that facility in a circle, very tight circle, and you read that. It was then that I became open to the 12 steps, because then in the beginning of that, it was super uncomfortable. While I was doing it, super uncomfortable, super emotional, super hard to get through. But the freedom that I felt after that, I was like, oh man, I had never experienced that before. I never experienced that my shoulders felt fine, right? I wasn't carrying a bunch of stuff with me. And so that's when I really got into the 12 steps. So, I've done the sponsor thing. I've worked the steps, I think 4 times, which is gross because the 4th step is a pain in the butt, and it says a lot about my character.
No spoilers.
My character defects that I had to do that.
It's a lot of work.
But it's a lot of work, and so so that's my experience. I do not claim to know everything. I'm not here to be the guru of any 12-step program. I want to share my experience, and I just want to thank you guys for joining us. So over the next 12 weeks, We are going to be taking a dive into the 12 steps, step by step. And we're just going to have open discussions about what that step looked like, what it meant to us. It's going to be really awesome because we're going to have Isaac here who doesn't have any experience with it to be able to like ask us those questions that maybe family members or people outside have. And I hope you guys enjoy. And thank you for tuning in.
See you next week.
See you next week.
Thank you.